Hello and welcome back to HubTech Cars. Today I am doing a video on importing campervans into Ireland. I'll be covering a few examples from bringing a campervan in from the north of Ireland, the mainland UK and the EU. I'll be discussing VRT and how much you can expect to pay on your campervan. I'll be discussing, if required as well, VAT and import duties that you might have to pay on your camper. And I'll also cover some common pitfalls that people make when importing a campervan, and I'll talk about maybe some routes for VRT that I would recommend personally. So let's get stuck into it. Lots of people ask me, how much does it cost to bring in a campervan from the UK? And the quick answer I always give is whatever you pay in euro for your campervan in the UK, add 50% of the value of that camper to VRT it and have it registered on Irish roads. Before I go into too much detail, my high-level advice to you is, if possible, try to avoid importing a campervan from the mainland UK. Simple reason being, it just costs a lot more money. You have to pay your import duty and your VAT on top of the cost price. As really the route I will be recommending for people today is look into importing a campervan from the north of Ireland or from within the EU itself. Broadly speaking, like any car that you'd be buying, I recommend you try to get a service history for the campervan, assess if it needs a new clutch, assess if the mileage is genuine, all of the normal things you do for a regular car. An excellent piece of advice I can give off the bat is look for 30-year-old campervans. I know they're old and they might be more costly to run and lacking in maybe some modern features, but the VRT on those is capped at €200. The most common question I ever get from anyone is, oh, but do I still have to pay VAT if it's coming from the north of Ireland? And the simple answer is no. Revenue updated their own guidelines on this in January, and it really does help us all out. So their guidelines is if a vehicle has been in the north of Ireland for a reasonable time, it won't be eligible for a VAT charge of 23%. So what does reasonable time mean? It is regarded that 3 months is enough time for a car to be in the north of Ireland to escape VAT charges. But you have to be able to prove to revenue that the car has been in the north of Ireland. Best way to generally do that, make sure that the car or the campervan has a Northern Ireland registered plate, that it has been registered in the north of Ireland. Secondly, a Northern Ireland MOT is a valuable document to have on the campervan, as it proves that the campervan has been in the north of Ireland for more than 3 months. And it's a document that revenue won't question if you bring it into your VRT appointment. Also worth noting at this point is that if you are bringing in a campervan from somewhere else in the EU, like France, Germany, Spain, the Netherlands, etc., you don't have to pay any VAT or you don't have to pay any import duties. You'll just be paying the VRT charge. But in general, I just want to point out that if you are bringing in a campervan from Northern Ireland or the mainland UK, please remember to have the V5C book with you. This is essentially the logbook for the campervan, and without it, you cannot VRT your campervan. So very important to have that. Next, I just plan to run through some real-world scenarios and some real-world examples of VRTing campervans. Quick plug here. I have another video all about the VRT process, and I'll throw up a link into the description. If you want to know in detail about the VRT process and what you need, I highly recommend you check that video out. Okay, so let's run through some real-world examples of VRT charges that could occur on campervans. So for this example, I'm going to run through a campervan that was imported from the mainland UK into Ireland. Fiat Ducato from 2003. And let's say that we paid €20,000 for this campervan, and that revenue have it valued as €25,000. That is known as the open market selling price. This is where a lot of people get stung on the VRT. They think that they have to pay VRT on what they paid for the car, but in fact you pay VRT based on what revenue you think your car or camper will actually sell for in the Republic of Ireland. So I'm probably being a little bit generous here. It probably would be more, but let's just say it's €25,000 is the open market selling price. So the first charge to come up is 10% import duty. That is charged on the open market selling price and the cost of shipping and insurance of bringing your camper van into the Republic of Ireland. So for this example, I've just made that figure 26,000. That's 25,000 open market selling price plus say 1,000 for ferry and insurance or whatever you need. That charge then is €2,600. Next, we have to pay our VAT on this. As I mentioned at the top of the video, anything that comes from the mainland UK is now susceptible to VAT coming into Ireland. VAT is based on the open market selling price plus the cost of shipping, plus the cost of insurance, plus the import duty. So that figure is €27,600. 23% of that gives €6,348. Finally, we have to do our VRT charge. The VRT charge on all camper vans, regardless of engine size, is 13.3%. Well, there is a slightly lower rate as of January this year for very low CO2 camper vans, but I haven't seen anyone avail of it yet. So the VRT calculation in this example is 13.3% of €25,000, €3,657. So let's add together all of those fees and taxes and charges. That's €12,605 is the cost to register this camper van on Irish plates. Remember my little algorithm or ratio that I gave at the start? I said it's roughly 50% the cost of a camper van in the UK to register it over here. In this case, this scenario gives us 61%, so it's probably a little bit more nihilistic of an example. So all in all, this camper van is costing us a total of €32,605. Let's take an example of the exact same camper van worth the exact same amount of money that is in the north of Ireland, and I'll show you then how much you can save. So the VRT is a very simple charge. In this example, it's 13.3% of €25,000, which is the revenue deemed open market selling price. That's €3,647. That's the total cost to bring this camper van in from the north of Ireland. So you can see we have saved €9,000 by buying the exact same camper van from the north of Ireland versus buying it in the mainland UK. If we take an example of importing a similar camper van for the same price from Germany, for example, the VRT charge works out the exact same. Some people online claim that you have to pay extra VAT on a German camper van import. They cite that the camper van VAT rate and car VAT rate in Germany is 19% and it's 23% here. So some people have claimed you have to pay that 4% extra to the Irish government to make it match. I haven't seen any real world examples. I've asked a few people and they haven't heard of it either. However, you will have to factor for it'll cost you a good bit of money in diesel or petrol to drive that camper van back from Germany, shipping, insurance, accommodation for yourself if needed, flights, things like that. So it's a really good option as well. So some common pitfalls. As I've mentioned, most people think the VRT charge is based on what they pay for a car, not what revenue thinks it's worth. So that's often where people end up paying a lot more than they expect to pay. A common pitfall, I would say, is just people don't have the correct documentation with them. The logbook is really important. If you're bringing that camper van in from the north of Ireland, just make sure you have a complete paper trail to prove that it has been in the north of Ireland for more than 3 months. If you have that, revenue can combat you on it. Next category really is just to talk about some general hints and tips that I could give. I won't mention the 30-year-old VRT cap again because I'm beating that one to death. An interesting one is that ambulances are exempt from VRT. So if you're going for a possible camper conversion, that's an interesting route to consider, and I know people have done that. It's also worth being aware that vans have a lower VRT rate, and some people bring them in to do conversions, but the problem is that you will get stung when you actually register that conversion with the state from a van to a camper van, and you usually just end up with a big VAT bill again. If you're thinking the conversion route, it seems that the minibus is the preferable option. You have to pay VRT on it, but it is VAT exempt once you convert it into a camper, so there's not really as many hidden sneaky charges with it. So I know people who have gone down that route and it has worked for them. My final general piece of advice is, if you're really not sure about any of this or you have more questions, I really just recommend phone calling Revenue in their Wexford office. I'll flash up the number here on screen and I'll leave it in the description of the video. But they are actually decent to deal with on a human level. And if you have any queries, they will do their best to help you out or give you the information to fill in the blanks. And I probably will just plug again at this point, if you want a more detailed video on the VRT guide and what you need on the day, please do check out my other video here. So finally, wrapping up in summary, importing a camper van from the north of Ireland really is the best route at the moment. Yes, there is limited stock up there and dealers are probably adding on a bit onto the purchase price, but if you want a straightforward import, that's the best way to go. Secondly, imports from, say, other European countries are very good as well. They're cost effective, but just be aware that you're going to spend a good bit of money in flights and tolls and fuel getting your camper back home. Final piece of advice really is to try and avoid the mainland UK for camper imports. As I've shown in this example, there's just so many extra charges. Maybe some of you out there, that won't affect you or bother you, and the extra charges might be worth it because there's so much camper van stock in the UK. That's fine, that's a legitimate argument, but I just want to make people aware that you could be paying thousands and thousands more for the exact same camper van. So just please be aware of that. So that's the video for today. If you enjoyed it, please do like and subscribe. If you have any meaningful contribution to make, please do comment as well. I hope that I've helped people out on this one. All right, take care. Thanks a million for watching. Bye.